This book presents a new view of the history of Central Eurasia and the other parts of the Eurasian continent directly involved in Central Eurasian history. Originally, I planned to write a sketch of the essential topical elements of a history of Central Eurasia, without much of a chronological narrative. Having in mind the French tradition of writing professionally informed but readable essays for an educated general audience with minimal annotation, I imagined it with the title Esquisse d'une histoire de l'Eurasie centrale. In the actual writing, the people and events insisted on following their proper order, and I found myself giving a basic outline of the political and cultural history of Central Eurasia within the context of a history of Eurasia as a whole, sometimes with extensive annotation, only occasionally involving re-examination of primary sources. Nevertheless, I have kept my original main goal foremost in my mind: to clarify fundamental issues of Central Eurasian history that, to my knowledge, have never been explained correctly or, in some cases, even mentioned. Without such explanation, it would continue to be impossible to understand the ebb and flow of history in Eurasia as anything other than the fantasy and mystery that fill most accounts. Mysteries are intriguing, and sometimes they must remain unsolved, but enough source material is available to explain much of what has been mysterious in Central Eurasian history, without resorting to the usual suspects. In this connection, there is a widespread opinion that few sources exist for Central Eurasian history, and consequently little can be said about it. That is a misconception. An immense body of source material exists on the history of Central Eurasia, especially in its connections with the peripheral civilizations. Because that history covers a span of 4 millennia, and as there is a correspondingly large secondary literature on some of the topics within that area and period, to do it any sort of justice would require a series of massive tomes that could be produced only by a team of scholars, not by one writer working alone, with attendant limitations on knowledge, skills, energy, and time. The only way a single individual could manage to produce a book on such a huge topic would be by pulling back and taking a big picture approach, a very broad perspective, which, as it happens, is what interests me. In general, therefore, this book is not a highly focused treatment of any specific topics, individuals, political units, periods, or cultures, not even of the Central Eurasian culture complex, which deserves a book of its own, with the partial exception of those that are of particular interest to me. It is also not an exhaustive account of events, names, and dates, though the observant listener will note that I have tried to provide that information for all important events and people, even though I sometimes have had to go to surprisingly great lengths to find it. Finally, it is not a source study or a comprehensive annotated bibliography. In recent years, a number of excellent studies have been published on some of the most notable people, places, periods, and other topics, with full annotation and references, and I recommend them to interested listeners. What I have done is to re-examine the more or less unitary received view of Central Eurasians and Central Eurasian history and attempt to revise it. Whatever detail I have been able to squeeze into the narrative or the topical sections is there mostly because it seemed important to me at the time, and I did not want to leave it out. That means I have left out many things that are undoubtedly important, but did not seem crucial to me at the time, or that I simply overlooked. However, this book does not go to the other logical extreme either. It is not a general theory of history, and I do not intend to imply any such theory in it. There are many recent works of this type, but my book is not one of them. I also do not examine in any detail the many theories, or rather variants, of the one current theory of Central Eurasian state formation that have been published in the past few decades, though they are discussed briefly in the epilogue.